Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Super Dandori Bros Podcast, episode 17. We are your hosts. I am Leighton, and with me I have the graphics... I don't even know where I was going with that. I was going to say graphics snob, but it's not true at all. I wasn't going to lie. Didn't I use illustrious? I'll just call you illustrious from now on. Yeah, illustrious sounds like illustrated, which sounds a lot like the topic we're talking about today, which is graphics. And this is a very broad topic, and we're definitely not going to get into super nitty-gritty stuff, and we're definitely just so much nuance to this, but we kind of wanted to talk about, of course, Nintendo, and definitely the games that we feel, like certain franchises where we feel like the graphics have varied a lot, where we feel like it's really shined, and where we feel like maybe it's fallen flat, the different art styles they've used, and we'll tie all that together. But we're just going to talk a little bit about like the different ways Nintendo has really utilized graphics in a way that's been very impactful and really works with the way the game plays. They've been pioneers in that regard in different ways and how they've made games stand the test of time. Yeah, what do you think? What's your thoughts on that, Ryan?
Absolutely. So I think, we know that Nintendo's design philosophy for a game typically is they come up with sort of a gameplay hook, and then they sort of figure out the story and everything else around it. And I'd be willing to argue that the art design in some ways is probably approached in a similar way, where it's like they sort of know that they want a specific gameplay hook, they design the world around it, and then they also have some feedback into that process from what remainder of the resources on the console for graphics are possible. And so you end up seeing sort of a really great mix of different art styles and different series, and especially depending on what platforms they're on. And I think that some of the examples that we've sort of compiled and we'll discuss will sort of illustrate that point, no pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to accidentally make a lot of puns. I'm thinking like what the franchise I think that is the easiest to start with is probably Mario. Being one of the oldest Nintendo franchises, has been on a multitude of systems with multiple different styles, whether it be just graphically, art style, or just the dimension that you're working with. Mario has, in so many ways, stood the test of time. And I'm trying to think of like, what's a game you feel like really like is the most iconic Mario style to you?
Yeah, so I think in terms of like iconic like 2D Mario, I think there's no contest as the original Super Mario Brothers. I think that is easily the most iconic like Mario side scroller. I'm not saying it's necessarily the best, but I'm saying it's the one that like people recognize the music. Oftentimes they'll recognize like level 1-1, like they will recognize the intro to that. It's I would say that is obviously a great starting point for Mario, because that was his original starting point. And I think at that point, games sort of hadn't really figured out what they were going to be yet. Like that was still an experimental phase for game development. Like we didn't really know what the world of video gaming was going to look like in the future. And I think that, those that survived the test of time and became classics like the original Super Mario Brothers are sort of, what helped determine what future developed games look like. And I think that, the art style in that particular case, while iconic, was sort of necessary at the time based on the hardware that they had. And I think that as you see Mario evolve over the years with subsequent generations of consoles and new games and essentially new like mini series within them that we'll discuss, like you'll see that as the consoles become more capable, then the art styles become a little bit more varied. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that, the NES and the original Mario Brothers is a great example. Obviously, it's very iconic, but it's kind of phenomenal when you actually stop and realize that there's the original Mario Brothers, which was, pioneering game, but very simple, kind of really when you look at it. It's not like doing anything too crazy visually, but on that exact same system, they come out, they had Mario Brothers 2, but then you look at Mario Brothers 3, which to me is kind of like the one that set the tone and the standard for like the style of Mario games that we kind of know today, with the map world, and then even the look to a certain degree. And it's all running on the exact same hardware. Really goes to show the power of just obviously just graphics optimization, right? They knew that system. It was kind of towards the end of the NES's life, but also just changing the style, the look. They kind of figured out a little bit about what they wanted to do with Mario, and it's kind of cool to see that evolution, because starting at very simple, like again, like just I don't know. You look at the original Mario, you can know what he is, but he's very like it's almost more pixelated than even the Mario Brothers 3. And then of course, then you go to Super Mario World, which is just kind of Super Mario Bros. 3, but just on steroids in a way. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, but like it's similar in that you have the map and the levels, and obviously the fidelity is just so much better with the music and the sound chip. But yeah, you can see this evolution of Mario's styling. It kind of took a weird turn with the N64. Once it went to 3D, they didn't really know what to do. If you actually look at a lot of promotional materials for Mario 64, I mean, he kind of has a certain look that you recognize, but like a lot of the way they made Bowser and Peach and Mario, the original ones, you could tell they weren't 100% sure how to weren't sure how they want to translate them to 3D.
Absolutely.
That was a challenging time for them to kind of pivot to 3D Mario, especially because they have these assets for the marketing, but then he looks very polygonal in the game. But they did a good job. I mean, obviously it's a very iconic game, but you can tell that there was like this style that they were going for. And again, the 90s were a weird time too. Like they were trying to there's times where they're trying to make Mario look very like kind of hip and cool in the marketing promotional materials, and then they finally settled now today on this very friendly, nice plumber that just is almost always smiling. But
almost all the time.
Almost all the time, yeah. A lot of the stuff too. I mean, there's a couple times I'll make him look angry if he's competitive, like in a sports game. But overall, like he's always got like a very cheerful attitude. But but you look at the cover for Mario Sunshine, he's kind of got like an angry look. Like you can tell it's that era where they're trying to make him look very appeal to teens.
Yeah, it's like they were trying to make it more epic. Which, granted, I love Mario Sunshine. I don't know if I would consider it, truly an epic adventure, but I think that, it is kind of a wild departure from Super Mario 64. Not just in, like, gameplay, but also, in some ways in art design. One, because you just had more that you could play with, but also you just saw more rounded things than you did in the N64 era as a result of that increased power. So if you think about, a lot of the enemies that you fought, the fact that they chose fluids to be a big theme, like the paint and the water, those tend to make circles on flat surfaces, for example. It's very clear that they were going for a very different art style than the very angular Mario 64. Whereas Mario 64, like a lot of the caves were very angular, the pyramids were angular. Obviously it was in Peach's castle with very angular architecture. Like ultimately it's there is actually a pretty big disparity there, even if you don't necessarily realize it at first.
Yeah, Nintendo definitely, that's the thing that Nintendo does a lot, and you mentioned this I think before, was that they lean heavily into a style that works for the system that they're on. So they knew that they were going to be, they kind of probably did a lot of testing with the graphics, and they're like, okay, well, we need to make levels and designs and art styles that really fit this world, right? Because we don't want things that are supposed to be round, but everything's, rectangular or triangular. So they did a good job kind of hiding that. There's a few things that were kind of a little funny looking, like Goombas and chain chomps, and I'm thinking of things that are like kind of rounded, but overall, like you're right, they pick things that definitely fit the style of the game. And then Sunshine, it was kind of like I think Nintendo really they didn't do as well in the N64 era, even though the N64 was really like the most powerful system. They just didn't do very well. Nintendo they'd been kind of relying on that. And so then the GameCube was them really trying to flex on PlayStation. Like they were like, this thing is super powerful, guys. You gotta come see this. And Mario Sunshine kind of is that, because you're right. They did a lot of fluid based stuff, which is like unheard of, you know. And that's it launched with Wave Race, so clearly like they were trying to showcase like, look what we can do with this system. And Mario Sunshine, I think, is a game that holds up today. It definitely, like, there's certain parts of it that definitely are a little bit rough. But overall, like, it definitely, again, the art style carries it. And, they put in the Mario 3D All-Stars, and I thought it looked great. Just made it HD. Then you start heading into, like, Mario Galaxy. And I feel like, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but if you think Sunshine or Galaxy was where they really kind of settled on the Mario model that we see today.
I feel like Sunshine was probably like the first time. I would say, like, if you look at the contrast between like 64 and Sunshine, it's pretty obvious. And Sunshine and Galaxy, there are differences, but and I would say that the Galaxy one is closer to the more or less modern one, with the exception of Mario Kart 9, because clearly he's getting a little bit of a change. But I would say Sunshine and 64 had a bigger difference than Sunshine and Galaxy, wouldn't you think?
That's true. I mean, I definitely see like there's subtle things they changed on him, but like overall, you're right. I mean, Mario Sunshine is where we kind of got the model. I should say we know today. I would say, yeah, it looks like Nintendo's going for a little bit of a, I think because of the movie too, like the movie kind of brought Mario back to being a little bit more, dare I say, pudgy.
Yeah.
Like, and so you see that in Wonder, and you see that in Mario Kart World. Like they're trying to make him a little bit, like, feel a little shorter, has a little bit more of a belly. Like he's a little bit different. Versus I think those other games he looked way more like Mario Galaxy. He looks very thin. I think overall, like, I don't remember super well with Mario 3D World, but he kind of still felt similar. And then Odyssey, he's just, I don't know. Odyssey's very much the same as even Mario Galaxy, just higher fidelity.
Yeah, I feel like it sort of just got locked in for a while there from Galaxy through Odyssey, really. Like, I barely noticed any difference. I feel like the big difference with Odyssey, like, graphically, is just sort of the fidelity and detail.
Yeah, and Odyssey is an interesting one, because it's kind of going a little bit more it's definitely stylized. I mean, you definitely got the worlds that are very stylized, like the food world and stuff, but then you have these weird gritty ones kind of mixed in there. Like it was kind of a weird, like I mean, I'm not saying weird like bad, it was just a very different type of game with a smorgasbord of art styles kind of blended in. Like it almost felt like a potluck, because you'd have the level like the food one where it's like super like basic colors and shapes, and then you go to like the world with the dragon in it, and it's like you just feel like you just jumped into Dark Souls. Or when you take over a T-Rex, or you go to New Donk City and there's real people, like normal sized people walking around. It's like very juxtaposed.
Yes. And actually it was a big turnoff for me when they showed New Donk City and Mario Odyssey. I'm like, I don't want to play this. This looks bizarre. I don't like this.
I think a lot of people felt that way.
Yeah, but then obviously, I did end up playing it I think from your recommendation, actually. And, now I do think it is the best 3D Mario game. I don't know. I'm hoping that whatever the new 3D Mario is surprises me, but I do love Odyssey in a way that I don't love the other ones quite as much. Though I do love, the other ones as well. Just Odyssey's different for me.
Yeah. And I think overall, like, I think one of the things we were thinking about too when we were bringing up the graphics subject. So we've talked a lot about, like, we've kind of gone through almost a gambit of all 3D Marios. We didn't really touch too much on the 2D Marios other than Wonder. The new Super Mario Bros. Games pretty much all look identical. Like, they basically didn't change a thing. And that version of Mario is very much still like the Mario, like, I would say Mario Sunshine formulaic. Galaxy,
Yeah.
But, going from 2D to 3D, like, I would say other than, like, the original Mario, which has a little bit simpler colors and stuff, like, they've kept them fairly the same. I mean, I've changed some of the look, but overall, he's still like this plumber with the same colors throughout. So I would say this is not a game where we've seen drastic changes in style. Like we didn't see anything like we did with Legend of Zelda, where we went from Majora's Mask to Wind Waker.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Uh,
And I mean with very negative backlash at the time too.
mm-hmm.
And I had never played a Zelda game, and but I'd played Smash Brothers. I'm like, oh, Link looks cool. Like I want to play a 3D Zelda game. And then like I went over to my friend's place and tried Wind Waker. I'm like, what is this? This looks awful. So
Yeah.
even I, like not even a cat, and that like not even like a Zelda player at all at the time, was like, what is this? I don't like it. Now Wind Waker's my second favorite 3D Zelda,
Yeah.
with Tears of the Kingdom being number one. But
Yeah, it's kind of this game that it's kind of like those movies that were like not very well received at the time, but have become cult classics that everyone talks about.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's basically Wind Waker. And Wind Waker has had the very, very unfortunate life of always releasing on one of Nintendo's worst selling consoles. So
It has the Pikmin legacy.
it has the Pikmin legacy. Pikmin's at least broken that legacy now, releasing on one arguably could be Nintendo's best selling system of all time with Pikmin 4. Like actually have a game built for that system. But yeah, Pikmin 1 and 2 on GameCube, Pikmin 3 on the Wii U, and Wind Waker, unfortunately, releasing on the GameCube, and just the worst possible time with everything else coming out, and then coming out as an HD remaster on the Wii U. Just destined to never get the love it deserves, even though there's tons of people clamoring for it.
Yeah, and the rumors of a re-release on Switch, for all these years, and it's just never happened.
Nope, we get Wind Waker on Nintendo GameCube Classics on Switch 2.
Which to me, like I get why. Like they obviously want to get people to play it. They want the expansion, to be adopted more. At the same time, like I do feel it's unfortunate that it is kind of the worst version of Wind Waker, because like normally you wouldn't necessarily think that there are that many big differences, but simply because of the travel time. If it's the exact same as the original GameCube, that's going to be rough, because it was hard to convince my wife to sit down and even play the Wii U version, where travel was drastically sped up.
Yeah, it's a bit of a patience thing there. You have to be willing to put in the time when you're going across the ocean. But it is a game, though, that is probably one of the quintessential ones that people point to when it comes to art style over graphics. It was kind of somewhat the inspiration for even this whole topic, was just this idea that, at least for a lot of Nintendo games, they've been very, very clever in using very good art styles that have allowed a lot of their games to withstand the test of time, because they were just so like thought out as far as like how to do it. Some games you could argue maybe not as much, and that's just a product of their time. Like I think certain N64 games struggle because they were just again a product of their time. But Wind Waker was one of those games where at the time everyone just mocked it, because they were expecting basically what Twilight Princess eventually became. And you look at Wind Waker today, and it's on the NSO, and it still looks really good even without the HD remaster. Whereas Twilight Princess, despite even with the HD remaster, which does make a huge difference, like I've seen both. I played the Twilight Princess on the Wii. I have it for Wii, and I have the Wii U version, and it's pretty drastic difference. But it's still, to me, has not aged very well as far as the style goes. It was Nintendo kind of trying to appease fans and make this gritty Zelda game, but in doing so, now the game just looks like a product of its time. Whereas Wind Waker, like the HD remaster, looks like a game that could come out today.
Yeah,
I mean, the original game definitely still kind of looks like a product of its time a little bit, just because of certain menu, and it's not widescreen and things like that. But if you made it widescreen and updated the menu assets, it could pass as a game today.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
and it's still incredibly fun today. Like even from a gameplay standpoint, it still holds up. You absolutely could keep playing it. Like there's no problems with the controls necessarily. Like nothing that like screams like, oh, we absolutely need like a remake of this. Like we don't, I mean, we'll never turn down the HD remaster because of, the quality of life improvements from like travel time, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like just the raw like combat and gameplay, puzzle solving, platforming, everything, like otherwise it's actually still very, very good.
Yeah, and something I learned that was so interesting. I don't know if I don't know if I mentioned this on a previous podcast or not, but the fact that the Twilight Princess game is built on the exact same engine as Wind Waker.
And you may have mentioned it, I'm not sure, but it is still quite bizarre.
It's so bizarre. It kind of shows it's not really about graphics. It's all art style. Like, it's just insane. Yeah, I mean, and I'm not trying to in this. I'm not trying to say like, oh, Twilight Princess is bad. I'm just saying that like I think arguably most people would agree that Wind Waker looks better today on like if you emulated it or played it today. It just holds up and looks nice. It's easier on the eyes than playing Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess, you can go back and forth on what dungeons you like, what tools and gameplay, and that's a whole different argument. But I think visually speaking, it's pretty easy to say that it's easier to go back and play Wind Waker than it is to play Twilight Princess, especially if you play them on their original consoles, not HD remastered. So remove quality of life improvements, remove HD, all that stuff. The choice is clear. So
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, no, I mean that's just two games, and then you look at like they went on to the Wii, and then they kind of tried to do this weird hybrid with Skyward Sword. I feel like where they kind of kept the Twilight Princess dimensions, like he's not short, and cartoony. He's kind of regular height. Everyone's kind of regular size, but they kind of then blended it with this kind of very cartoony aesthetic and very goofy characters. You got Groose. I mean, and to be fair, I really actually like the characters and all that from Skyward Sword. I think the main problem with Skyward Sword is its linearity and its controls, but I think overall the actual like game itself is actually really, really good. But yeah, graphically it still looks nice, but it almost, I feel like kind of in a weird way, I don't know, how do I put it? There's times where I feel like it didn't quite get the best of both.
No, unfortunately. I feel like there is graphically I agree with you. I think that, I would say that if their goal was to do something that was sort of a mix of Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, I feel like Breath of the Wild actually ended up achieving a better mix of that than Skyward Sword ever did.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. I was actually going to bring that up, that Breath of the Wild kind of is the second chance of that, because I don't play Breath of the Wild and think of it as like a very cartoony game though. Like they kind of hide it really well, because even though it does technically use a lot of cell shading, it does still have a little bit more grittiness to it. It still kind of has a Twilight Princess-esque, like, the people still look at people, but it's more like an anime than a cartoon. Like
I could see that, yeah.
That's kind of the inspiration I see, like a Studio Ghibli kind of film, very painterly, very artistic, but it still has a very like anime kind of aesthetic with the way the characters look, the cell shading, and the mannerisms and the cutscenes definitely kind of have a very anime vibe. And so I think that's kind of where they went, where like you could tell Nintendo really wants their Zelda games to have that look, because they hold up better, they're less resource intensive, and they are more pleasing to the eye in a way. I think if they were going for, I think if Zelda went like, I was gonna say Dark Souls, but Dark Souls is probably not the best example. Like I'm trying to think of like a more realistic looking game, like like the Oblivion remaster. Right?
Yeah,
it looks very high fidelity. I don't think Zelda would ever look good in that world. I don't think a Legend of Games,
and I don't think it would last. I think that like Wind Waker, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are sort of going to stand the test of time. And I think, and there's obviously the longevity argument to why you should do it, and also I wanted to touch on briefly the resource argument for it. Like you have to imagine like having such a wide open world, obviously was the most ambitious thing they've ever done with a Zelda title. And like if you go through and like look at things, like the textures are not like super highly detailed or anything. They're, they, like you said, they cell shading masks a lot of that stuff, and I think that it's extremely impressive that you sort of in your mind's eye like think back on it. It's like, oh yeah, this looks phenomenal, and it's in some ways very detailed. But like while I'm playing it, I'm sort of looking at, and granted, I play in handheld mode, so maybe I'm somehow missing something with that. But it's a beautiful game. But there's not the sort of detail that you would see in something like a Pikmin 4, for example, on the same system. Also trying to run not as big of a world, but a larger world than it ever has before. And so I don't know. I think that they really struck gold with Breath of the Wild and Twilight Princess. And while I'd like to see them sort of maybe change a bit of the style, I think they sort of have the basic core of what they should have use moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely can see like with the new fidelity, the Switch 2, my thought is that they lean even harder into that kind of artistic style and kind of go almost Okami levels of like painterly. Like I've seen like the kind of trailers for Okami 2, and I looked at the way it's very like, I mean, Okami 1 was very like super amazing art style, just a great visual game. But it's definitely was limited by the PS2 at the time, and so I could see like when they come up with Okami 2, it's going to look way more like artistic, like more detail in the brushstroke kind of thing. And I could see a Legend of Zelda game going that. Maybe we've talked about this, I think offline a little bit, but the idea of, maybe we did talk about this in the podcast, but about there being like Nintendo leaning heavier into the Japanese styling and going like kind of a I don't know, like kind of like samurai style, like very like, I don't know, with more of the architecture, more of the art, more of the just very painterly. I don't know. It's just something I could see them doing, but just again with that high fidelity 4K level of, but still keep the big open world, but just do even more with the way it looks.
Yeah, I love that with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, there were a lot of them leaning into their Asian roots, and even like I think that the actually the quintessential moment of like that for me on the Switch was when I got to Bowser's Castle in Mario Odyssey.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is the coolest thing. Like, it was a total surprise because like every Bowser's Castle I've ever been to was like a typical like European style castle. And then you go to Bowser's Castle in Mario Odyssey and it's like, this is like totally different and I love it. Like, that's phenomenal. Like keep doing stuff like that and surprising us that way. Just even with something that like didn't even have in too many gameplay ramifications. It's just like art style like that. Like, please continue.
Oh yeah, and it made it so epic. It was such an epic level. And I love the costume you get there too. Just everything about that level is super cool. And yeah, I do see that also in like Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, with the certain towns and just certain homages they do to Japanese culture and that, which makes sense. I mean, it's made by a Japanese company, but a lot of times it seems like they've kind of held it back a little bit or hidden it. So like you look at, older Mario games, like there's no sign of it being Japanese. Like Mario Sunshine, it's like it's like Hawaii, tropical vacation. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see where they go forward with both Mario and The Legend of Zelda. But what's a franchise? I was gonna say like let you kind of lead on the next one. Like, what's another franchise you feel like has had some variation in art style that you know?
So yeah, I'd like to bring up. This is another one of the things that I felt inspired this topic was I want to talk about the route that Pokemon has taken, because I feel like that is an example of a series that in some ways was better off back when they were using sprites. And I think that that's sort of, one of the things that we did want to talk about was sprite-based games and how those can still look good. The HD 2D style being sort of an example of that. Like that it doesn't appeal to everyone, but for me, I look at that and I'm like, oh, that's actually very pleasant to look at, even though it uses sprites in modern day. And I just feel like it would be a great like topic for or a great inclusion in this particular topic.
Yeah.
So we can go all the way back to like original, Pokemon like Red and Blue, here in the United States, and obviously like you go, it's the first Pokemon game. Pokemon's essentially a new IP. Again, they still haven't quite figured out what they wanted Pokemon to be. I've seen some people like analyze Red and Blue, and what's kind of interesting is like from a gameplay standpoint, at least, it seemed like they actually wanted you to switch up your team every time you went to a different town. Like actually switch out your team entirely. Like the intention wasn't for you to keep the same monsters the whole time, because they would generally include Pokemon that were super effective against like the next gym, at least nearby. And so it almost seemed to it seemed like they, from a gameplay standpoint, we're still trying to figure out what they wanted Pokemon to be, because it was so new and there wasn't quite anything like it before. And then like visually it's sort of the same thing. A lot of the Pokemon look very different in Red and Blue sprites than they do in Gold and Silver sprites. And Gold and Silver, I think, is more or less where we got a lot of the solidification of a lot of the Pokemon designs that haven't changed much since. Now, Pikachu is obviously famous for having sort of slimmed down over the years, kind of like Mario.
Yeah.
Where he was like super fat in like the original games and the like a lot of the art, and then he has just slimmed down over the years. And you can look at that either way that you want, but point being is, with the sprites, like they clearly had a lot of character in the beginning. I remember like, you go from Red and Blue to Gold and Silver, and there's color, there's higher resolution sprites. You can tell what the Pokemon is. It's not a jumble of random pixels. And then when they moved to Crystal and they added those little sprite animations in the beginning of the battle, I remember like that was mind-blowing at the time on the Game Boy Color. And moving forward with sprites, you go to Ruby Sapphire again, sprites look amazing again, more colors, better like color fidelity with what you sort of wanted the Pokemon to look like. You were getting even more coherence with the anime and the color scheme with the Pokemon in the anime. Shiny Pokemon ended up being a little bit more defined or better defined in Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald than they were in Gold, Silver. A lot of the shiny designs actually changed. Not a lot of people know this, but some of the shiny designs actually changed between them, like the color palettes. And then you go all the way to Black and White. And I know you haven't played Black and White, sadly, and Black and White 2. But then they added essentially just motion sprites, right? And where it's sort of on a loop. And they have sort of these aggressive stances. Like they look like they're ready to fight, right? And there's no like variation of that when they do an attack or anything. But they are like sort of constantly moving around. I hated that at the time. I thought that looked so bad. I didn't, and it actually was one of the reasons why I didn't finish Black and White on the first go, or Black and White 2, and I actually came back later and finished them. And now I have a much better appreciation for it. But I think, in terms of all the mainline Pokemon games, like those sprites, you can see a very clear progression that as the technology improves, you get better and better sprites until Pokemon Black and White, where that was sort of the culmination of it. That's sort of as far as we got. And then you ended up transitioning to 3D models. And then even like remakes since then, they have used 3D models too. And it has sort of sucked the soul out of them. Like they just sort of like sit there, and you could argue that that is a byproduct of, imagine trying to make a bunch of 3D animations for, 900 plus monsters or whatever. Fair. But that might be an example of where, and granted, I know that the Pokemon Company and Nintendo are technically like separate entities. Pokemon Company is only about a third owned by Nintendo. At the same time, you would think that maybe this is a time to leverage the same game development philosophy that Nintendo uses, where they recognize a limitation in their hardware or something in their game development process, and then they capitalize on that and change the art style to make it even better. So you could imagine going back to sprites in a way that is more akin to like an HD 2D remake. Like, let's say they were to remake Gold and Silver again. Instead of putting it in 3D, imagine doing like an HD 2D remake with that. More interesting lighting, sprites that move and have unique animations when they attack, for example. So that's sort of my overall thought on the mainline Pokemon games up through, like Gen 6 or so, which is about well, no, you played a bit of Gen 8.
Yeah, that's
so,
which Gen 8
yeah.
is Sword Shield.
Yeah, Sword Shield.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like what do you think? Good recap.
Yeah, absolutely.
for most of it.
I fairly much agree with you. It's so funny because I remember way back when it was still Pokemon, just Red and Blue, and then Yellow, and then I think it might have been when maybe Gold and Silver had come out at that point, but Pokemon Stadium had come out, and that was mind-boggling to me as a kid. Like, it was so cool to see these Pokemon in 3D, and to have the the camera panning around, have this announcer, like it was so cool. And I just thinking, man, just imagine if Pokemon games were like this, right? Instead of these 2D little things. Well, basically, we got that with Pokemon. Was it X and Y? Was pretty much the first.
X and Y is when they made the jump, yeah.
And I remember thinking, we're here. We've made it. This is Pokemon Stadium, but like the full game. And I thought this was going to be the coolest thing ever. And then when we got it, I was just like, this just feels so boring now. And maybe it's just that I got older, or maybe I expected too much. But like, I don't know. Maybe there's just limitations. But like, it just felt like very, like you said, they just sit there and the attacks never really feel like it comes from them in any special way. Like the animations never really fit the attacks always as well as you'd like. Especially with some of the really cool, unique attacks. And so, yeah, just definitely kind of left, me wanting more. So it would be kind of cool to see them go back to sprites. I would love them to see, like, do more with sprites where, again, like, have more custom animations. I know that's a lot of work, though. I mean, like you said, you got so many Pokemon that all need to be animated for all these different types of attacks, right? So it is a lot of work. So I don't know if it's cheaper to do it sprites or with 3D models. Like, what's easier from a resource perspective? Like, I would think they'd want to invest more in their 3D models since that's their long-term goal, and then just create more custom animations for them that they can just pass on to future generations of consoles. But
yeah, possibly.
But I do like the idea of at least going back to a sprite-based thing at some point, just because. Maybe they'll do it for like some kind of nostalgia. I just still can't believe they haven't released any of those games on like the NSO. I
think that's kind of wild.
But maybe they're afraid people will just play those and never play the new stuff. But I guess they'll go back and be nostalgic.
It's certainly possible. I mean, I think, ultimately, like sort of thinking about my favorite Pokemon game of the Switch generation, which is Legends Arceus. That sort of like counter to my point. Like, again, they do sort of just sit there. Legends Arceus did feel a little bit more dynamic to me and a little bit more exciting than Sword Shield or Scarlet Violet. Though I don't think they were really doing much. It's been a while since I played, but they more or less weren't doing anything like all that different, I guess. So, but Legends Arceus did have a different sort of style. If I remember correctly, it was sort of leaning more into the cell shaded sort of art style than,
which I liked.
Yeah, I liked it too. And I think that it sort of fit with, again, some of the way that they presented, like when you use the the two different attack forms, the agile style and the and you sort of did get some of the brush stroke, what do they call it? It's like a pop-up image essentially, like it was leaning into the Asian inspired, so it's almost like they were sort of
doing what we asked.
Yeah, doing what we asked in some ways, but but also like sort of taking inspiration from some of Breath of the Wild and eventually like almost Okami as well. Yeah. When you think about it, so it was just kind of weird. I only just realized that
it really did feel like they were somewhat inspired by Breath of the Wild, and especially with being open world and things happening. And I'm curious to see how Pokemon ZA does, because it seems like a step backwards, where they're kind of going
I agree.
more towards like a Scarlet Violet, and some people have pointed out like the graphics are like almost even a further step back. Maybe they're just trying to go for stability at this point, but like the architecture is very bland and very boring, even though you're in a city where it should be like really amazing because you're going to be looking at it for a long time. It doesn't have the cell shading. But I'm curious if they put all their resource points into maybe better Pokemon animations, because it looks like the fights are going to be a lot more real time this time. And so I'm wondering if this will maybe fix some of the issues we have with like the Pokemon like animations, with them actually being like more active, involved, and looking like they're actually doing something. Because as we're talking about this, I see this parallel to another game series that I feel like I know we're kind of leading towards, and I don't want to jump.
We're heading there.
I don't want to jump off the train of Pokemon just yet, but I kind of feel like I need to bring it up because there is a parallel there, and it's just between Pokemon and Fire Emblem.
Yeah, 100%.
And you and I have talked about this at length, that the GBA sprite animations are the peak of Fire Emblem. Like, as far as like characters, and it was just so interesting because they were fully animated. Now, a lot easier to do because they didn't have like 30 attacks they could learn that they had to have animations for. They just had a few. So it was much, better, easier to animate, but they were just so good to look at. Like every encounter felt really epic and cool. It also hurt a lot more when you died because you just get absolutely skewered by like a general or something. So
and when you scored that critical hit, when you scored that was like the best feeling in the world. Even though you didn't do anything, it was it's literally just probability.
But it made it feel more impactful. But then they moved to new Fire Emblem games, and I just felt like, man, why do these feel so bland and boring? Like something about 3D just loses all of its charm. And it's not like they can't do that stuff in 3D. They just kind of got lazy or something, because like I'll put it this way, and this is something near and dear to your heart right now. I've been watching videos about it, but a little game that just came out today called Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Ryan has been so excited for this game. I'm jealous because I don't get to play it right now. But I was watching videos of this, and talk about like that's the pinnacle of showing how you make cool action scenes in 3D. Like even though it's a turn-based RPG, it just feels so engaging and interesting, and the characters are doing just the coolest things on screen when they're doing these fights. I'm like, well, why can't Fire Emblem do that? Why can't Pokemon do that?
And the menu's so dynamic. So for Pokemon, I'd love to pitch this sometime. I have in my mind like a reworked and of course, like animation wise, this is be like a living nightmare, but I think it's a really interesting way to do it. And so I'd love to see someone try it at some point. Maybe not necessarily with Pokemon, but with something. I'd love to pitch it sometime, but it's like way too long. I don't think I've ever told you about this, but I've thought about it for years, and I think it'd be a really cool way to fix Pokemon battles in a way to make them like look cinematic and really interesting, while also leaning into the turn-based nature of it. Like at some point I'd love to talk about it, but I don't think today's the day.
Oh man, but I think there's something really big there. I was like waiting for the drop, but like nope, cliffhanger.
It's a cliffhanger, but I think there is a way to do it. And actually Clair Obscur Expedition 33 actually does a little bit of it. Anyway, it's that like that is a way to again, it's leaning into the art style. It's leaning into and also like Expedition 33 also does some great stuff with the sound design and the music as well. That makes it all fit together. It blends really well, as I'm sure you've seen from the videos. But like Fire Emblem, when they had sprites, it felt like the game had a soul. But again, once they got to 9, like I like 9, which is Path of Radiance, and that's the one. The first one on GameCube, but it just never caught me the way that Fire Emblem 7 and Sacred Stones did. And I feel like Awakening in some ways tried to recapture it a little bit, and it got close. But it just didn't quite get there for me. And I think that if they were to remake Fire Emblem 7, this is going to be really unpopular, I'm sure, but I think if you did an HD 2D remake, I think that would look really, really good.
Yeah. I think that's the only way, because you can kind of add some modern, feel to it without
Mm-hmm.
completely losing it. You could actually probably do some pretty cool things with the 2D HD 2D kind of vibe to it. But I don't know. But at that point, people would wonder like, why even bother? But uh, I don't know. It's so kind of back to Pokemon a little bit. I'm wondering if part of
Yeah.
like Game Freak's issue is that they've kind of dug their own grave by making too many Pokemon in every game, expecting to have every Pokemon now, and they just cannot. Like, that's kind of what's eating up all their resources and time, and that's why their games are poorly optimized and graphics suck, because they have to spend so much time just making the animations, making the characters, making all the attack. Everything has to be worked out, and then they have to kind of cobble together a world as best they can. And I know that's a really,
Yeah.
really, 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 really lame excuse for what their games have been with Scarlet and Violet and stuff, because they have the money to make them look good. It's probably more time than it is money, because they push the
I think
teams
it
up.
is time.
Because
I think it is time.
they absolutely have the money, and that's what everyone just can't wrap their heads around. Is like, now throwing more developers at it doesn't just make things look better. Like, you can throw another 300 developers at it; it may not make it that much better. It's still, you still need more time. But this is kind of goes back to when we talked about the whole idea of a live service game, because I just feel like I don't know how they have to keep rebuilding these games every time. It just gets out of hand when you have that many Pokemon. You need something where you just kind of build a base for it and then just keep adding to that, and just add, even if it's not even a live service in the sense of like make it, just have expansion packs or something, where it's still the same base game. And then you can just upgrade the graphics. I mean, like World of Warcraft did it, where,
Yeah.
they just added these expansion packs and the graphics just kind of got better over time. The game looks way different now than it did when it first launched.
Yeah. And I think another solution to this, that they've done, but they partially implemented, and I hated it at first. I thought it was the dumbest thing. Most people did hate it. Was limiting the Pokedex.
Yeah.
And they limited it severely in Sword and Shield, and it was a huge negative at the time. But it actually solves a lot of different problems, and not just a resource problem, but it also solves the power creep problem. Where new Pokemon either were irrelevant or they were like the hottest thing. You know what I mean? Because they're better than previous stuff, or they're useless.
Mm-hmm.
And so you did just keep getting better and better Pokemon. That's why Incineroar was a staple in competitive for the longest time. It may be back again. I haven't kept up with it in the past year, but that was a Gen 7 Pokemon, and it was carried forward. Like, it was incredible. It's like probably the best competitive Pokemon of all time, except maybe Zacian, which got a nerf in Scarlet and Violet. But anyway, point being is you solve the power creep problem and you solve the graphics problem. So I think that, again, this is like leveraging gameplay decisions to improve the overall product, and also leveraging that to help the art style as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the problems with Scarlet and Violet were things like the frame rate. Like, clearly graphically they were trying to do too much at the same time as everything else, and it just wasn't optimized, and overall it just ended up being a mess.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many aspects to that. We've kind of touched on it, but definitely time optimization, too many Pokemon, and just, I think to a certain degree you can definitely chalk up a bit of laziness in there, perhaps, just because they do keep selling the games. Let's just be real. They sold a crazy amount of Sword and Shield, crazy amount of Scarlet and Violet. Despite all the backlash, Scarlet and Violet still sold phenomenally, and they're going to keep selling phenomenally until people stop buying them. But they definitely aren't as incentivized to change the quality. But we'll see. I think with Switch 2, they kind of are backed a little bit into a corner here. They can't just make games that look like Scarlet and Violet anymore. They kind of have to up the ante now, because the system is basically a PS4 Pro, and people expect a little bit more. I don't expect it to be like the Pokemon movie,
No.
Detective Pikachu levels of fidelity. I hope it
No,
doesn't,
there's no.
because that would be
No.
horrifying. But I do think that, and I don't even expect the Pokemon to look better per se. Like, I think to a certain degree, the Pokemon. I mean, I'll just be honest. The Pokemon don't look bad at all. Like, there's nothing wrong with the Pokemon in the Pokemon games. They all
No.
actually look pretty much how I expect them to. I don't really want them to be higher fidelity. I think they need to stay that art style. They just need to make the world more interesting to be in.
Well, the world more interesting, and you need to make the animations for the Pokemon more interesting.
Yeah.
Because they just sort of sit there. Like, if you took a still, of them in the middle of like an attack or something, like maybe you could make it like look cool. And like looking at the actual fidelity of them, like you said, like it's fine. But when they just sort of like sit there and do nothing, like that is part of the art style when you think about it. Like, it's not just how does it look good in a still, but how does it look good in video,
I just think that the end goal of a Pokemon game, and this is just what they'll eventually reach one day, is to just make you feel like you're in the show. Make it so that when you do some of these attacks, just the coolest things happen, right? Your Pokemon just do these crazy moves, and just like make it epic, right? Don't like that should be like the thing they're chasing after, is to eventually make the game feel like you're playing the show, that you are Ash, or probably not the new show, because I don't think too many people are excited about it. But yeah, you want to be like...
I don't think so.
So I think that to me is the goal, is to make... Because my kids are watching... right now, they're starting to watch the original Pokemon. They've watched the first 18 episodes of Season 1. And it's fun to rewatch that stuff with them, because you forget just how cool and epic some of the stuff is. And I know it gets better and better, but just watching how it started... And it's all nostalgic for me, because I remember watching those first few seasons before... I can't remember why I was able to. But anyway, point is... Those are really cool, and that's what you want to feel like in the game. And so I think that should be the end goal, which then kind of leads into the question too. It's like, okay, everything's 3D, but wouldn't it be really sick if Pokemon was kind of like, what are those fighting games that look basically like you're playing the show? It's like I've seen like some YouTubers play them. It just feels like you're playing an anime, like. What's that one with that girl with the dolphin?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, Donkey did a video about it. I feel like I'm gonna have to look this up. Oh man. Anyway, but just like this idea of it basically like every frame being like an anime frame, like a cartoon basically, but not a cartoon, like an anime. Man, I feel so dumb not knowing what this. I'm gonna see if I can find.
I assume you'll edit this out.
We'll see. You can keep talking.
Okay. Yeah, I probably should. Yeah, I mean, obviously I have very strong opinions on this, and they actually are sort of contrary to what I had before. Like, I was really excited for the switch to X and Y, but partially because I didn't like black and white at the time. But I can see what people mean by, they're like essentially like the Pokemon have no personality now. They just sort of like sit there. And I think I would imagine that sprite work would be more easier to go back to. Like, and I am just going to be an advocate for sprites for this sort of thing. And maybe that's wrong. But I personally like them a lot. I think that they have a lot of character. And maybe I'm just nostalgic for it. I did grow up with early Pokemon games. And with the Fire Emblem games on Game Boy Advance that released in the United States.
Yeah, I think that's a part of the reason we're so leaning towards sprites, is just because of that nostalgia. And I wonder how long that'll last, too.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, if newer generations, maybe they play it like they're playing the older games, but like we grew up with, that was like the only games we could play. So it makes you wonder, like, what's it going to be like when eventually, like my kids, right, who are growing up with all these 3D games, are they going to want to play 2D sprite games? And I'm like, I don't know. Also, I found the game. It's called Guilty Gear.
I've never heard of this.
I just remember watching. I guess it's still technically 3D, but it's like shaded. But it just looks like, I don't know how to put it. Just looks like you're playing like 2D cartoon cutouts of characters. Also, like I think Street Fighter 2 remake kind of did something like that too, which came out like launched on the original Switch. But I have that, so it just looks like you're playing animation. Like that would be interesting if you did that for Pokemon, where it's like it's more 2D, but it's not 2D sprites. It's like actual like cartoons, animated cartoons, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I shouldn't be saying cartoons because that kind of implies something else, but you know what I mean. It's animated. Yeah. That would be kind of an interesting style for Pokemon. Sorry for that crazy tangent, but by the way, it was just like it was driving me nuts that I couldn't figure out the name of that game, and it literally was like it's Guilty Gear, and I had to find a video from 3 years ago on Donkey's channel. So,
oh wow, okay.
Yes, I mean that's. I don't know. So Pokemon, yeah, definitely has an uphill battle. I'm very interested to see. I think Pokemon ZA is not going to win any awards for visual fidelity, even with the upgrades that the Switch 2 is going to bring. It's basically just making the game playable on Switch 2. Mm-hmm. I really hope that they are able to focus on not just graphics, but also like, frame rate and keeping the game running properly too. It does feel like they might be, because it has been a while since Scarlet and Violet came out, and so I'm hoping that they are putting the time in necessary for the next Pokemon game and are really going to do something that wows people. So we'll see.
I certainly hope so. I want Pokemon to do well.
Yeah.
Truly. I do consider myself, more or less a fan of Pokemon, even if I don't necessarily like what they've done recently as much.
Yeah, I want to like Pokemon. I mean, again, like Arceus was the first game where I kind of came back and was like, wow, this is fun. This reminds me of the fun I remember having playing Pokemon. And granted, I think that the late game stuff gets a little bit rough, but overall the story was fun, the gameplay was fun, the worlds were interesting. There's still some weaknesses in it. Like there's definitely times where I was playing in the open world and I was like, yeah, this is a bit rough. Like the world's very plain, like not a lot of interesting stuff going on, but it was a step in the right direction. That's what gave me hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
ZA kind of feels like a step backwards, but I have to give it a chance first, so I probably will play it because it is a Pokemon Legends game, and I think it does still have some gameplay ideas that I really want to see work. We'll see how reviews are. That might dissuade me. I'm kind of on the fence, so if there's a good enough reviews, I'll give it a buy. If people are saying, no, this is trash, I'll probably skip it, but I'm
sort of in the same boat. Like, as much as I love the first Legends game, it was, like, really stoked when they announced a second one. I'm like, okay, perfect. We'll hopefully, get something good out of that.
Yeah.
I sort of had a bad feeling when I saw even just the announcement trailer, which showed absolutely no gameplay, and I'm like, oh, this is like set in an entire city. Like, I don't like this. This isn't quite what people liked about Arceus. So it seems like they took the wrong lessons potentially from Arceus, but we'll see.
Well, ZA seems like their experiment zone. It's where they get to play around and try different things. So I think that's why it's so weird and different. We thought that Legends Arceus was going to be like that was the standard, and it was just going to be more of like that. But it looks to me like there's definitely similarities. You still throw Pokeballs, and you still have areas where Pokemon run around, and it's evolving the, no pun intended, but the formula a bit with the real time fighting. They are trying new things, which I'm kind of like, okay, at least they're like, I appreciate that they're experimenting. Maybe I'm not a big fan of the experimentation, but the fact that they're willing to try new things and break away from the formula, okay, that's a good sign. We need them to try new things so that we make Pokemon more interesting, because eventually it'll become irrelevant. It doesn't matter how big the franchise is. It can still go into irrelevancy if they don't, start making some good games. So, it'd be interesting to see what they do after ZA. But, we're supposed to be talking about graphics, and we're talking about like gameplay stuff, but
we are largely gameplay people. We don't do graphics much, but we did, I think, want to discuss the graphics that we did like, which maybe also happen to be with games that have excellent gameplay.
I don't think we're not blind. We definitely still are drawn to games that look nice, and there's definitely, like, again, I think some of this idea came from the Fire Emblem side of things, when we were both reminiscing about, especially since they just added Sacred Stones to the NSO on Switch, and it just got us thinking, like, hey, man, and I still have the GBA cartridge for the Fire Emblem 7, which I believe you gave me as a birthday present. So
I might have, yeah.
And or maybe it was Metroid Fusion. Why, I don't know. No, I thought it was Fire Emblem. Anyway, it's point is that it's still a fun game to look at, and I on new Fire Emblems I just turn off that now. I just have the little characters just basically hit each other in the overworld, and whatever happens, because the animations just take too long and they're not that interesting. Whereas the old games, it's like, no, I want to see that. I want to see if they get a critical hit. Like, that's such a rewarding feeling, especially when you give them like a killer sword, so you know that there's like a way higher chance they're going to get it. And then Lynn does her like crazy sword moves and disappears. It's like, or Hector like just basically just, I don't know,
just bonks him.
Yeah, they just, or I don't know, there's so many cool, like, just
the sword master.
Oh, the assassin was sick too.
The assassin was awesome. And then the assassin having that hidden ability in 7 where he could insta-kill people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was some really, really cool stuff there. So that's kind of where a lot of this thought process came from me. But
yeah, I would like to briefly touch on a series that didn't change their art style all that much.
Yeah.
Which is Pikmin. We'd sort of discussed that. And I think, it just sort of goes to show that there are just some things that are going to be dictated by the kind of game.
Mm-hmm. You got it right the first time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they not only did they get it right the first time, but it was actually, like, in some ways sort of integral to the experience. So, like, I think Pikmin's a great example of that, because, you essentially were trying to make it look as good, and I wouldn't quite say photorealistic, but fairly high fidelity for what you could at the time. I'd say Pikmin 3 and 4 are probably the best examples of that, obviously, because they're the most recent. With both you and I remarking on just how good Pikmin 3 actually looks, even just on the Switch with the port. But I think why that's important is because it is supposed to be, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't played them, it's more or less supposed to be, Earth. Mm-hmm. And you are playing as, essentially a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids sort of like small people in a really big world sort of motif, where it is important that things actually do look fairly similar to how they do in real life in order for you to sort of like not only connect the dots yourself, which probably would be, easy to do even with, maybe a more abstract art design, but it sort of does make you feel small. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that that delivers on the theme quite effectively. And I think, unfortunately, it does sort of place a tax on what you can or can't include in any game, because you are trying to run, 100 Pikmin plus enemies plus the AI for all the Pikmin. I assume that they have some tricks behind the scenes that allow them to sort of centralize some of the AI. Like maybe they calculate an AI for groups of Pikmin at once and not for every single individual or something. I'm not quite sure what they do to free up as many resources as possible. But whatever they do, it's clearly impressive.
Some basic path tracing.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Yeah, I don't understand the mechanics of it completely.
Well, that's my guess is just like, they basically are just objective, like get here. Like they're not really like thinking about like what to do. Like they don't try actively really avoid bad guys or anything. They're not like actively, sometimes they might seek something out. So, I mean, I'm oversimplifying. It's probably a little bit more complicated than that, but I'm sure they've come up with a very, very simple algorithm for them to basically follow and just somehow multiply that, or they usually work as a cluster. So I would assume that there's a little bit of that, but I mean, they're just geniuses though. They got that running on GameCube. So
yeah, which is impressive.
But you're right. It is interesting thinking about the style of that game, where it actually is one of the few Nintendo games that kind of has always and needs to seek a realistic fidelity because of the setting it's in. And it's so funny because you think about like Pikmin 4, which, I mean, obviously isn't photoreal, but is pretty darn good. And like there's certain items you pick up in that game that do look really, really good. Like some of the food and stuff. But like I remember one of the first main items you get in Pikmin 4 is a Game Boy Advance SP. And it looks so good. It's just like
Yeah.
you could almost read what game's in it, and it's like it's like, man, it's just very really cool to see something look so photoreal in a Nintendo game. And I just think I don't know how they're gonna, the Switch 2 Pikmin is gonna just blow our minds. I don't know, it's gonna feel like we're in reality. I feel like, I don't know how, but
yeah, I certainly hope so.
But
I'd love to. I'm very hopeful we get a Pikmin 5. I think we will. I think that the future of Pikmin has actually probably never been more guaranteed. Weirdly, because we were sort of just in a place where it was in probably the most limbo it's ever been, and now we're sort of in a place where, well, it was, the last one was so successful. I mean, granted, not Breath of the Wild successful, but so successful for a Pikmin game that we more or less are guaranteed to at least get one more.
Oh yeah, and we're now at a point where, with the Switch 2 being backwards compatible with Switch 1, it has every single Pikmin game, minus Hey Pikmin and all that. But point is, any mainline console game. So anyone who buys a Switch 2 has the ability to play every single Pikmin game. So, and if they do, please come out with a Switch 2 edition for Pikmin 4. That'll just bring even more attention to the game and more attention to the franchise. And I think that's really like what we hope for. But yeah, we'll see. It's interesting, like, where so much has changed between Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Pikmin, like what has changed, what hasn't changed. There's so many more franchises. We may revisit this subject with some different franchises. Like, I thought it'd be interesting to look at Animal Crossing, because that's actually has changed a lot more than you think over time.
It has.
Not just from a graphics, but just the way the world is perceived. Like, you think of Wild World versus other ones. And then, there's some other franchises that I'd love to touch on, like, I mean, for you could talk about the Mother series.
We have, well, yeah, I can talk about the Mother series.
What were you
I was
saying?
going to say Star Fox. We gotta mention Star Fox.
Oh gosh, we gotta mention Star Fox. Yeah, talk about changing graphics. Holy cow. Yeah. So this.
But yeah, the Mother series I could talk about.
There's more.
Absolutely.
So, but anyway, I think that's gonna be it for today. Thank you for hanging out and listening to the Super Dandori Bros podcast. And I'm amazed you got this far, so thank you. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
If you got this far, please leave a comment. Let us know you made it. And otherwise, we'll be back again next week with another podcast. If you have any suggestions for podcasts too, we're just kind of like come up with ideas on the fly, but we'd love to get comments and suggestions from people of topics you think would be interesting. Since we don't have an insane amount of viewership, we'd love to cater to you guys. So let us know what you'd like to hear about. And anyway, that's been it. We're your hosts. I'm Leighton. He's Ryan. And we will talk to you again next time. Bye.
See ya.